It's been raining in Chattanooga for 3 days, and you're sitting in your car in the parking lot at Waffle House. It's 3 in the morning. On the passenger seat is a printout with a photo and address. In the back is a bulletproof vest and handcuffs. In the glove compartment is a 9mm for which you have a permit and an energy drink, your third of the night. November 1997. The guy you're looking for is Dwayne Pickett, 24 years old, bail set at $15,000, failed to appear at his hearing 3 weeks ago, and bail bondsman Ron Daly called you and said, find him. 10% of the bail. $1,500 per person. You found 7 in the last 4 months, and you've never wondered whether it's a good job or a bad job, because before that, you spent a year and a half putting up drywall, and your hands remember, and your back won't forget. Fort Campbell, 101st Airborne, 4 years, 14 months of which were spent in Somalia, and at bases that are not talked about. You came back at 24, and your girlfriend met you in a supermarket parking lot, where everything is too noisy and too bright. Knoxville, Tennessee, mother in the same house, father gone since you were 16, left, a Christmas card, 3 years later, the card stopped. Mother worked 2 jobs, cashier and cleaner, and you joined the army because the army feeds you. Came back, tried being a security guard, boring. Tried construction, hard and boring. Tried the police, failed the psychological test, and you still don't know exactly what you answered wrong, but you have your suspicions. Ron Daly, bail bondsman, office on Magnolia Avenue between the pawn shop and the barber shop. Bald, sweaty, former sheriff's deputy, fired for something he tells a different story about every time. You came to him because a friend said Ron was looking for people who were looking for people. Ron looked at you and asked, Army? You nodded. He opened a desk drawer, took out a folder, and placed it in front of you. A photograph, a name, a case number, the last known address. He said, bring him to me, and you'll get 10%. If you break anything, it's your problem. If he breaks anything, it's also your problem. The first one is Leroy Sampson, 29 years old, aggravated assault, bail set at $20,000. Address, trailer park in Alcoa. You arrived in the afternoon, knocked, no one answered. A neighbor in a bathrobe was smoking on the steps. You walked up and asked, have you seen Leroy? She looked at you, took a drag, and said, who are you to him? You said, a friend. She laughed because Leroy doesn't have friends, only trouble. But she said he was at Cheryl's, his ex, who lives on Hunt Road, greenhouse, dog in the yard. You drove to Hunt Road, found the greenhouse, and saw that the dog was an old Labrador that didn't even get up. You waited until dark. Leroy came out on the porch to smoke, wearing a t-shirt and flip-flops. You approached him from the side and said, Leroy, I'm from the bail office. Let's go. He looked at you, looked at the door, estimated the distance. You saw that look, calculation, legs, or fists, and said calmly, don't, Leroy. He threw down his cigarette and walked to the car. 2,000, easier than drywall. The second, third, fourth, the same, petty, drugs, and hooliganism. People who aren't exactly hiding, but simply didn't show up in court because they got drunk, or forgot, or hoped they would be forgotten. You find them with relatives, with girlfriends, in the same bars where they were arrested the first time. 10% cash, Ron takes it out of the safe and counts it in front of you. The job is simple. Find them, approach them, talk to them, take them away. You quickly learn that the main thing is not handcuffs but your voice. It's the same trick as in the army. A calm person with a weapon is more frightening than a screaming one because the screaming one is afraid and the calm one has already made up their mind. The fifth is Nate Ramirez, methamphetamine and possession, bail set at $25,000, truly escaped. He didn't just fail to appear in court, he left. You sit in Ron's office and look at the file. Last known address in Knoxville, relatives in Memphis, ex-wife in Nashville, mother in Atlanta. Ron says he could be anywhere. You say his mother. People run to their mothers or from their mothers. There's no third option. You drive to Atlanta, 6 hours, find his mother's house, park across the street, wait. 1 day, 2 days. On the third day, a pickup truck with Tennessee license plates pulls up to the house, and Nate Ramirez gets out with a bag from the grocery store. You wait for him to go inside, wait for him to sit down, ring the doorbell. His mother opens the door, a small woman looking up at you. You say, "Ma'am, I need your son. I'm from bail bonds. If he comes out on his own, it will be better for everyone." She closes the door. A minute later, Nate opens it, angry but not stupid. He holds out his hands. You handcuff him, lead him to the car. His mother stands in the doorway watching, and you don't turn around because you don't need to look at her face. You already know what's there. 2,500. You go back to Knoxville, and Ron says, "I've got more, and more, and more." By the end of '88, you're working for 3 bail bondsmen, and you've got more work than there are days in the week. You buy a decent car, not new but with working air conditioning. You rent a 2-bedroom apartment instead of a 1-bedroom. You buy a second bulletproof vest because the first one stinks so bad you can't wash it. The first time you get shot at is in March 1999. Mobile, Alabama. You're working on a tip from an agent in Birmingham. The guy's an armed robber. Bail is $50,000. Commission is $5,000. You enter the apartment. The door is unlocked. It's dark. It smells like rotten garbage, and he's standing at the end of the hallway with a double-barreled shotgun. You see it, and your body does everything on its own. 4 years at Fort Campbell react faster than your brain. You duck behind the wall, and the shot hits the doorframe, splinters flying into your face. You pull out your gun, yell, "Drop it, drop it, drop it," and he drops it. Because firing once out of fear is one thing, but reloading and firing a second time is a decision he doesn't have the guts to make. You push him face down on the floor, your hands shaking, but you manage to handcuff him on the first try because your body remembers, even when your head isn't working. On the way back, you park at a gas station, get out, and throw up behind a trash can. You get back in the car, turn on the radio, and drive away. 5,000. By the time you reach 2,000, you're earning more than you thought possible for someone without a degree and who failed a psychological test. You know things that aren't taught anywhere. You know that a man who beats his wife cries when he's arrested. That drug dealers run south and rapists run north. That in a trailer park everyone knows everything, and no one will say anything if you ask like a cop, but they'll tell you everything if you ask like a neighbor. That the most dangerous people aren't the ones with guns, but the ones with nothing to lose, and you can tell the difference between the two by looking into their eyes. Ron Daly sits in his office, getting fatter, counting money. You do the work. One day you count. Over the last year, you've brought him more than 80 people, for a total of $1 million in bail, of which you received 130,000. Ron got the rest and didn't leave his desk. You understand arithmetic. You go to Ron and say, 15% or I'm leaving. Ron looks at you, and you can see him calculating in his head how much it will cost to find someone else, how much he will lose while the new guy learns the ropes. He says 12, you say 15, he says 13, and that's his final offer. You agree to 13 because Ron is the only one in Knoxville who gives you steady work, and stability is worth 2%. 2002, you take on a case that changes the rules. Curtis Howard, 38 years old, fraud, bail 120,000, the biggest in your practice. Commission, $1,560. Howard isn't a drug dealer from a trailer park. Howard is a former accountant, a white-collar guy, glasses, and a bald spot. He left the state, leaving no trace, no relatives to run to, no girlfriend to hide with. You sit in your apartment and look at the file, and there's nothing in the file. The address is empty, the phone is disconnected, the credit cards are not in use. You start looking differently, not with your feet but with your head. You call his former employer, introduce yourself as a debt collector, and find out that Howard was into sailing. You call yacht clubs in Florida, 1, 2, 3. The fourth one says, yes, there is such a person, a new member who signed up 2 months ago, Sarasota. You get in your car and drive for 11 hours. You find Howard at the marina, standing on the deck of a rented boat in shorts and a Panama hat, looking like a man on vacation, not a man on the run. You climb aboard. Howard looks at you and says, I was expecting someone to come. I just didn't think it would be so soon. On the way back, Howard sits in the back seat, handcuffed in front, because he's not dangerous. He's just tired. He's quiet for 4 hours. Then he says, you know why I didn't resist? You don't answer. He says, because running is harder than sitting. You think about it later, at night, in your apartment, and you can't sleep. Not because of Howard, but because you understand him. You're 35 and you notice that you've changed. Not tougher. You became tougher a long time ago, but quieter. You've stopped telling people what you do because the reaction is always the same. Either it's like in the movies, or is that even legal? It's legal. In 39 states, it's legal. You're not a cop or a gangster. You're somewhere in between, and the place where you live has no name and no friends. Your mother in Knoxville knows you work in security and doesn't ask for details because she doesn't want to know. You had a girlfriend, a nurse, for 2 years, but she left because you're away from home at least 3 nights a week and can't explain where you are. She said, "I don't need a man I'm waiting for and don't know where he is." You didn't try to persuade her, not because you didn't want to, but because she was right. 2008, the financial crisis. More people are being arrested, bail is being set more often, they're not showing up for hearings more often. You have more work than ever. The irony is that when everyone else is doing badly, you're doing well. You take cases in 5 states, drive 20,000 miles a year, sleep in motels, eat at gas stations, and your car is more your home than the apartment with a bed, a table, and a TV that you turn on so it's not quiet. 2010, Memphis. A case that leaves you off work for 2 weeks. Sean Pruitt, 22 years old, drugs and weapons, bail set at $40,000. You find him at his uncle's house on the outskirts of town, enter through the back door. He raises his hands immediately in the kitchen, yells, "He's upstairs." You go upstairs, open the door, and there's Sean Pruitt sitting on the bed, and next to him is his daughter, about 3 years old, sleeping in her unicorn pajamas. She wakes up from the light in the hallway, looks at you, and you're standing in the doorway with a gun and a bulletproof vest, and the girl starts crying. Sean raises his hands and says, "Not in front of her." You put the gun away. You say, "Take her out." He picks up the girl, carries her downstairs, and hands her to her uncle. He comes back and holds out his hands. You don't say anything on the way back. You don't speak for 4 hours, and Sean doesn't speak, and the radio is broken, and the silence is so thick you can hear the tires rustling on the wet asphalt. At home, you sit on the bed and stare at the wall. You don't answer the phone for 2 weeks. Ron calls and says he has urgent business, and you say you're sick. You're not sick. You just can't. Then you can. You can always later because the rent won't wait and gas isn't free, and because you don't know how to do anything else. Not quite true. You know how to put up drywall, but that doesn't count. You pick up the phone, call Ron, say, "Got anything?" And Ron says yes, and you write down the name and you go. You're 43. You've caught over 1,000 people. Somewhere after 600, you stopped counting. Broken nose. Twice, once in Mobile, once in Little Rock. Scar on your forearm. Knife, Memphis, 2005. A guy slashed you while you were cuffing him. Not deep, but it left a scar. Shot at 3 times, never hit. Never fired a shot yourself. You draw, but you don't shoot, and that distinction is important to you, though you can't explain why. You've had 5 cars, 4 apartments. No woman has lasted more than 2 years. You call your mother on Sundays. She asks how you are. You say fine. She says eat well. You say I do. And the conversation ends, and you both hang up, and that's enough for both of you. At night in a motel in Baton Rouge after another job, you lie on a bed that sags in the middle and stare at the ceiling and think, you catch people who run away and bring them back to where they ran from. Court, prison, rooms with fluorescent lights and judges who don't look you in the eye. And you're a tool, a cog in a machine that grinds people up, and the machine works because you work. You're not a judge or an executioner. You're a courier. You deliver a body from point A to point B, and what happens to that body at point B is not your concern. That's what you tell yourself. You've been saying it for 15 years. And every year it gets a little harder to say, and a little harder, but not impossible, and you fall asleep, and in the morning you drive on, because the next name and the next address are in the glove compartment, and someone has to knock on the door.